Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to our live today. It's so good to be with you again. Really excited about today's show because we get to be with the founder of Darwin's Pet Food. We get to see exactly what is involved in having a raw pet food company and a really making a really healthy pet food brand today. So, really excited. But before we bring on Gary, bring on my co-host and partner in crime, and the man who puts barf in raw dog food, Dr. Ian Billinghurst.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Rob.
Good
And
morning.
good morning, Gussie, wherever you are.
Behind me,
Rob, of course.
asleep. When he sees this camera go out and me get into position, boom, nap time. Nothing's going to happen for an hour. I'm sure. I think he's got it timed.
You would have.
Anyway, so without further ado, let's bring on, I think, probably one of the best named pet food companies around, Darwin's Pet Food, the CEO, Mr. Gary. And Gary, we're going to ask you real quick, what's the easy way to say your name? Tashjian?
Tashjian.
Tashjian.
Think of a gin and tonic. Tashjian.
Okay, Tashjian. Okay, I will think of that next time.
Yes.
Can I stick with Gary?
All right, that sounds good. If I may call you Ian, Dr. Billinghurst.
I would hope that you would. That's
all right.
what my mother used to call me, and it works.
Well, it is an honor to meet you.
Well, it's great to meet you. It is absolutely fabulous to meet people.
Me and every other founder of a raw pet food company has your book on their shelf, and you were inspirational to me in starting this company. So it really is an honor to meet you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. It's great for me to see so many people taking up the mantle of raw, and you're one of my heroes because you do that. It's absolutely fabulous. I wrote this little book so I wouldn't have to continue promoting raw. Well, of course, that never worked, but I didn't realize what happened when you wrote a book. I was just a vet with an idea and a lot of experience with raw. But hey, it didn't stop me talking about it as I had hoped, so I could get on with other things like being a vet. Anyway, thank you for doing what you do. Let me say that from the outset. It's absolutely fabulous.
Well, let's get going. Let's hear, that's perfect entree into a little bit about learning a little bit about Darwin's and how you got started, Gary. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the early days and what made you start the company?
I started the company because I was feeding my pet this way. So it goes back to well, hang on a second. My dogs, Max and Casey here. Max is this one here. When he was about 10 years old, he developed a crippling case of arthritis and and I'm sure you folks have heard these stories or equivalents from hundreds of times that he could barely walk. And I tried everything that Western medicine had to offer at the time to no avail. And finally, in desperation, I went to a holistic vet, thinking that I wanted to try acupuncture, which seemed a little woo-woo to me at the time, but I was willing to try anything to help Max. And as I now would expect, the first question he asked was, "What are you feeding him?" And I said, maybe you should check your hearing, doctor. I mean, he's got arthritis. What does it matter what I'm feeding him? And he gave me a little finger wag and explained to me, gave me some articles to read and said some recipes and said, try it out. And within a couple of weeks, Max was up and walking around like a new dog. And his brother, Casey, who'd had chronic skin problems, they cleared up as well on the new diet. So suddenly the light bulb went on for me, and I realized that you are what you eat. That expression applies to our pets as well as to us. And of course, I did the next thing that everybody does when they discover this: they tell all their dog owning friends about it. And but invariably, I mean, after about the 30th, 40th time that I got the exact same answer, I understand why it's better, but I don't have time to cook for myself, let alone my dogs. I started to think, well, maybe there's an opportunity here that if I can make it convenient and affordable for people to have this food available to them, that there's an opportunity there. And I was looking for a shift in careers, so I bit the bullet and started the company, and that was 18 years ago. And I guess the other big difference, even though there were some of these foods available in stores at the time, that just added to the expense. So I went one step further and developed a process to deliver it directly to their homes. So by making a good food fresh and putting it on their doorstep, we were able to make it available to a lot more people.
That's great. You and I have the same origin story, because I looked for fermented foods for Gus first, and for a second, or like a minute, I fed him human fermented, but it had high sodium and lots of things I didn't want in there. And so I went and made my own, and I made it about as elaborate as we make ours now. And I realized how hard it is, at least for me, to make my own fermented. And, my pantry was stinking and all of this was going on. I thought, maybe there's a better way we can do this. And so here we are. But our dogs, man, where would we be without our dogs? They're helping us improve the world. They're making it really easy for us to see, right?
Yeah, exactly. And for me, initially, you'd think that I'd learned by now. We'd have days where I'd be up grinding their food, putting all the various ingredients and putting my chicken burrito in the microwave for myself. After a while, I started thinking, geez, maybe I should just make a little bit extra, and I'd be a lot healthier if I ate their food instead of mine, probably.
My last conversation with you, Ian, was you said I got to go prepare the dog food. So Ian does this very thing. It's like he's like doing meal prep.
Yeah.
I do that now because we had so much difficulty getting the commercial product to our place, and but I'm enjoying doing it now. And not only that, of course, I can fiddle around with various recipes, and that helps other people, which is my mission in life, of course. And Gary, your mission, I think, is fabulous. You're making raw convenient, and that's so important because, as you said, that's what people are looking for. They haven't got time to do this sort of thing for themselves. So when there's a good product there, it's so good to be able to recommend it and say, hey, get your dog onto this. We are going to see so much improvement in health once you start this food that's carefully crafted. So, I can only say congratulations again.
Thank you.
Another thing that I'm struck by is that another thing we share is that we're both much more on the business side of the company than, say, the nutritional side. In other words, you and I both don't have the alphabet soup after our name and all the, great, education and credentials. We pride ourselves on being able to go and find and work with some of the best people to be able to do that, and also look for efficiencies in the business so that you can bring this to the people. Because I'm sure you have the same. Well, you for sure have the same issue, which is there's a lot of ways to make your exact recipes very expensive, but to find the ways to make it, with labor and the building you're in and buying in bulk. All these things can be cost savings without sacrificing the quality of the product. So tell us a little bit about that, because you and I are very similar.
Well, you'd think it'd be easier. It's just taking the ingredients and grinding them up and mixing them up and putting them in a bag, right? You'd think it'd be easier, but it's a full-time job. To try and do it, and then especially during a pandemic, it gets even more complicated. But we've grown slowly. We've been around for about 18 years, so we've done a lot of trial and error on how we go about making this, and we think we've learned a thing or two along the way.
Yeah, well, 18 years, it's you probably learned a lot. Tell us about, by the way, anybody who's watching, I see we have people watching our live. please feel free to send in a question in the comments below on YouTube or Facebook. We'll be happy to look at those, and if we have time, we'll post them on the end of the show, and we'll answer them. But let's talk about how you got. I mean, how does a guy like you get started? I mean, I got started with Ian. He was my first phone call. So talk about how you got started with Darwin.
Well, it really was thanks to a couple of veterinarians, holistic vets, that got me on the right path. The first was, and these are local veterinarians here in the Seattle area where we're based. Michael Lemon was the first vet who I took my dogs to, who gave me the initial recipes, and that's what I used for making their own food themselves. When it came time to actually go into business and come up with a commercial recipe, I did some more homework. I worked with another local holistic veterinarian. Her name is Jackie Sen, and she helped develop the recipe. And this, we have an expression about ourselves that we say we're inspired by nature and informed by science. And how we went about the first recipe is exactly that. We started with Dr. Sen's recipe, which was modeled after the ancestral diet in dogs in this case, because we started out just making dog food. Then we took it to a veterinary nutritionist, and he ran it through his computer models, and we did a little bit of tweaking to that diet to make sure that it was complete and balanced. And so we going all the way back to our roots, we took that dual approach, which is where the name Darwins came from. I wanted to find a name that embodied that intersection of nature and science. So that's how we've approached formulation ever since. Is we start with the ancestral diet and are inspired by that, and very rarely, well, never deviate from that. But then, as we learn more and more about science, we make adjustments to take advantage of that new learning.
So Gary, can you tell me about some of the good or success stories? Because from my experience as a dog food company or owning or being part of, we get so much feedback from people with good stories. Can you tell us about some of those?
They make my day. I always say I don't get many of these calls anymore. When we were smaller, I used to get the calls directly. Now they typically would go to our customer service department, but every once in a while, one of them sneaks through to me, which is great, because I always say, no matter how bad a day I'm having, I'm going to get a little verklempt here. When I get a call from a customer that says, somebody told me about your food, and I thought I was going to have to put my dog down, and now he's healthy, and you've saved his life. Dr. Billinghurst, you must get this all the time. I've never had that kind of feedback in my career. To know that you've had that kind of an impact on a person and a dog. And our company's mission is to help people and their pets enjoy more years of healthy companionship together. And like I said, when I get one of those phone calls, it just makes my day.
So, Gary, I'm sure you, even though you don't personally get these, you're probably aware of the sort of problems that raw food is actually able to fix, just without medication, just without doing anything other than changing the diet. So, from your experience and your knowledge of 18 years, what are some of the conditions that you know that raw pet food has actually helped?
Well, the biggest ones are the ones I hear most of are the ones that my dogs originally had a problem with: arthritis, first of all, and then skin problems. Those are, in my experience, the two most common that I run into.
And I think that's the experience of people all around the world. They're possibly that's what we vets see consistently in older dogs is arthritis and some form of skin problem. And sometimes these with conventional veterinary medicine, they can be very hard to treat, almost impossible. And the drugs can have side effects. And then you put them on the diet, and these problems very simply and quietly disappear. And it's interesting that the very simple recipes that you first gave out actually worked without too much science involved. You just went straight to nature.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, what were those recipes way back then? Can you recall what you actually fed at that time to make a difference to your dogs?
The original recipe, the original recipes were a little bit different than what we're doing now. They were actually cooked, and they had rice in them. So when I started the company, we went in a different direction. But those recipes, they were mostly meat. I don't know if we even had offal in my homemade recipes, because that's tougher to source. But it was meat, some vegetables. I think I used eggshells as the calcium source, and then in my case rice, which they were older dogs, and sometimes that might be appropriate for an older dog to add rice to the diet. So it was similar, but not identical to what we wound up formulating when we started the company.
Now, when I hear that, Gary, it just tells me how really, 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 and I don't know how many reallys I can put in there, how really bad conventional processed dog food is. That you can simply take a bit of good human food, which is basically what you were doing, and feed it to your dog, and you're going to see so much improvement. Now, isn't that amazing? And if you go a little bit further and actually follow evolutionary norms and start feeding raw food and start following what they actually ate over evolutionary time, the changes are absolutely brilliant. So in many ways, I have to thank the processed dog food companies for my career, because if they didn't do such an incredibly bad job, I wouldn't be here talking to you in this way today, and you wouldn't be doing your job. So
I guess I never thought of thanking them.
I
never thought of thanking them for it, but yeah, you're right.
Well, when you study Chinese medicine, that was, which I did over many years, that voodoo stuff that actually works, where you torture them with pins. You learn things like that your adversaries become your best teachers.
All right. Good. I have experienced that.
That's great. Well, so tell us about today's formulas and how they've changed.
Not too much. I mean, we've wound up reducing, I'd say, the vegetable content. It used to be, but these are small adjustments. Our basic formula years ago was 75% or 70% meat, 10% of which was organ meat, 30% vegetables, half root, half green leafy. I mean, it was pretty straightforward. We've wound up reducing that, increasing the meat slightly to 75%, and decreasing the vegetables. And then we've added a vitamin mineral premix to it just to make sure it's complete and balanced. But other than that, we've kind of stuck with the original formulations.
So Gary, do you include any bone in your diet?
Yes. In our poultry has ground bone in it. The ruminant has we started with bone meal. Now we use calcium. I forget some form of calcium in it.
No, that's okay.
As opposed to bone meal.
All right. Something else was just going through my head then. It's gone.
It's when you heard bone, ground bone, probably.
Yes. Oh, cartilage. Do you add any cartilage to these?
Well, the poultry has it in it. The parts of the chicken that we use have cartilage naturally in it. So we always suggest that customers have a mix of poultry and ruminant, because as you know, the fats are different. There are things you get from one that you don't get from the other. So we always suggest that you do a combination of them.
I think that's absolutely fabulous. It was my philosophy from the word go that balance doesn't have to be achieved at every meal, because that doesn't happen in nature. So following Darwin's principles here, you achieve balance over time. And so if you've got your customers can achieve a balance using a combination of your products, that's absolutely fabulous. Now, I've got I'm hoping I was on your site. Did I see that you? Well, you have to forgive me. I'm only an Australian over here down under. We're not that smart, but and there actually seem to be a few things. In fact, we've got a port called Darwin here, so it gets quite confusing at times.
That's what screwed me up when I went for my original website. The name was taken by somebody in Australia, so I had to call it Darwin's Pet. I couldn't just go with Darwins.com.
Very good. Well, what I was thinking. Now that too has gone out. This is
you've gone on tangents. Well, let's take a quick question while you think you think of your question, Ian. So I like this question. So Rachel McCammont, thank you, Rachel, on Facebook. What are some good tips and tricks for beginners? I have 2 dogs and cats on Darwin, so it's a fan of yours, Gary. Great. And I just started my dogs a while ago and waiting on my cats for a shipment. So what are some good tips and tricks for beginners?
So it's different for dogs and cats. I mean, in both cases, and I should be letting Dr. Billinghurst answer this question. I mean, you've got much more experience with this than I do.
Yeah, but Rachel gets to have the CEO of the company.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Yeah. I'll take a shot at it. I always say with cats, you gotta take a long time to transition them. The cats, what we regard as cats being finicky is actually an instinctive wariness of a change in their diet. And so to me, you got, whereas I would say take a week or 2 to transition a dog, I would say take a month to transition a cat and just sneak in a teaspoonful at first to just get them used to it and take it very gradually to increase them to the point where they're eating just our food. With dogs, depending on the size of the dog, with a big dog, I've got a couple of golden retrievers lying at my feet, and I would suggest transitioning them slowly just to condition their gut, but they would be more than happy to eat 100% Darwins on day one. But I'd still say take a couple of weeks to transition them fully onto it. Maybe longer if they've got a sensitive stomach. And then if they're a picky eater, there are a lot of tricks you can do. I mean, one is cook the food lightly. Give it some aroma. A little grated Parmesan is often helpful. We don't offer it anymore, but we used to have what we called canine condiments, which is just a combination of normal household spices that if you sprinkle on the food, it just improves the taste a little bit. So a picky eater would be more inclined to start. And once they start and realize that it's food, that's half the battle.
Gary, I think with cats, they will tell us how quickly we can transition, and certainly I always think that the cats are more like my wife, and I really have to be very obedient to what they have to say. Whereas dogs, they're like blokes. It's just food is great, and they'll get straight into it. So with dogs, mostly, in my experience, unless they've got a real problem with a sensitive stomach, you can do an immediate transition. You can go straight over. One day, even if you maybe leave them with a good 24-hour fast, and this applies not so much. You can even do this with dogs they're picky eaters, but they don't necessarily have a sensitive stomach. They've become more cat-like, and they've actually got you under control and really to determine the pace of their life and what they should eat. But if you give them a little bit of starvation, 24-hour fast, they will eat just about anything. And I guess if you're living with a dog that can go out in the backyard and have a bit of diarrhea, if that is the case, that's not too bad. Not so pleasant if you're living in some sort of apartment, and that's that's the only space they have to go, or you've got to go out walking with them and pick it up with a bag. In which case I would suggest, proceed slowly.
Yeah.
In Australia, the other thing that you can do is go, and this is not using a commercial food, we just feed them some chicken wings and or necks. Now, it has to match the size of the dog. They may not have had this before. In this case, you do it when they are not so hungry, because many dogs, who've been on dry food, and you suddenly present them with a chicken wing, they say, "My goodness, real food at long last. You've woken up. You're not so dumb as I thought." And they will get straight into it. And sometimes they will literally inhale it. And if it is just the right size to go down their trachea, their windpipe, that is not such a great idea. But anyway, but having eaten a raw meaty bone right from the word go, they will have very tight stools. In the vast majority of cases, because that will tighten up their stools. But anyway, that's your advice was absolutely spot on, and I was just adding a little bit more to it. But I've remembered what the question was. I always have to write these things down. Do you produce some forms of diet for individual disease problems?
Yes, we do.
Like prescription type diets.
A couple of years ago, we developed in conjunction with a couple of the holistic vets that we work with here.
I think I've lost your transmission there, Gary.
Oh.
Should be a quick second. I see you, Gary.
Yeah, I'm still hearing you folks.
We'll give Ian's connection a little bit of time to catch up.
Okay.
But go ahead, Gary.
Shall I continue? So yes, to answer your question, yes, we have what we call our intelligent design line of prescription meals. And for dogs, they address kidney, liver, cancer support, and joint mobility. And for cats, we have kidney support diets. What we wanted to achieve with that was to
that's fabulous.
We wanted to provide an alternative to the commercially available diets, which take a kind of a Dr. Billinghurst, you or Ian, you understand this better than I do. The old school approach to some of these was, for example, for a kidney diet is reduce protein, right? And our approach is more to say, give a good quality protein and control the phosphorus. So we wanted to give people who wanted to feed real food an alternative to, I don't want to name the brands that we all know.
That's okay. So I think it's great that you're doing that, because with commercial prescription diets, all they do is address a metabolic imbalance, but they do absolutely nothing to improve the state of health of the body. They're not actually repairing the body. They're continuing with the same old. It's just that they might reduce protein to stop the nitrogenous waste, for example, and they might reduce phosphorus because that's what's really progressing the problem. But they're not, with real food as you're doing, it's almost like it for most cases, it almost doesn't matter that you even are not you don't even have to address the metabolic problem in a lot of early cases of these diseases. You just have to start feeding real food, and the problem disappears anyway. But of course, in the severe cases, then you do start to address the metabolic problem, which is what you're doing with your food. But in addition, your real food, your Darwin's based food, based on evolutionary theory, that food is going to actually begin to repair the body. So we actually see turnarounds, which is unheard of in conventional medicine, in the health of things like the kidney and the liver and the heart and so on, which is what we would expect from real food. I always say it's like putting the right spare parts in your car. They go a whole lot better.
Yeah,
and you're doing that, which is fabulous.
Yeah, I would never say that we're going to cure those things, but we're going to give the body the tools it needs, to support a healthy kidney or liver function.
That's correct. And you're helping the dog's body to better manage the problem. Yes, you're not going to cure it because the disaster that is produced by processed pet food really leaves permanent damage, but you can start to reverse some of that damage, not all of it. So you're never going to cure it. And of course, what we can't cure is the inevitability of getting old, as I've discovered over the last few years.
When you come up with a diet that addresses that, please let me know. I would love to hear about that one myself.
I will sing that one to the world. Well, I'm not sure that the world really would appreciate a heap of old geriatrics hanging around, but that's another story.
So tell us a little bit more about those specialty formulas. So does that make up a good portion of your business, Gary? I mean,
it's fairly small right now, and that we're hoping that can increase. We're getting the word out, and obviously we want to work with the veterinary community to get the word out about that. And during the pandemic, it's been a little bit hard to get that word out. So it's a small part of our business now, but we hope it increases. And frankly, we hope that it's, as you said, Ian, that it's a temporary thing, that eventually they can start out with that and kind of get their body back into shape and then transition back to a regular diet, and they don't need to be on the special diet.
So, Gary, amongst and I'll admit again, I wasn't sure whose side I was on. I was hoping I was on your side, and I'm so pleased that I was. But I can't remember. Did I notice a digestive formula there for digestive problems?
No, that's not us. I don't.
Okay,
think so.
Well, we've got to get one going.
Okay.
So we can improve your business, because there are so many problems out there. And of course, what we need to do, or even if you're not going to do that, and what we need to do is start putting some fermented foods into your products. Do you recommend that at all? Tell me about that.
Well, I don't have an informed opinion on it, to be honest with you. I mean, I talk to other folks that swear by it, and this is something that we're educating ourselves on. I mean, I regard myself and our folks here as students. We're learning, and we kind of move slowly. I don't feel like we necessarily need to modify our diets, but that's something that people can add to our diet. Like Gussie's gut could be added to us for fermentation. So we're exploring that slowly. We want to make sure that we that we are deliberate about those kind of changes. But the people whose opinions I respect advocate it, so we pay a lot of attention to it.
Yeah, okay, and with good reason, Gary, because from my perspective, when Rob approached me about Gussie's gut and the fact that he was making this fermented dog food, I got really excited, because for me it was the one thing that was missing from most of my work when I talked to people, because it was difficult to incorporate some of the human kefirs and sauerkrauts and things into the diet, and I wasn't sure that they were doing such a great job anyway, but it was all we had. And this was kind of like the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle in the raw diet for me. And this is the sort of thing you can add to anything. So people can add some fermented Gussie's gut food to any of your products, and just make them that much better. And again, that's just such a fabulous thing to do, and an easy thing to do. Rob has made this an easy fix, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. And I say, well done, Rob. And you combine Darwin's food with Gussie's gut, and we now know the microbiome is such an important part of overall health, mental health, psychological health, physical health, everything, immune system health. So your Darwin's food, because it's raw and well formulated, is already doing that, and then we just supercharge it with something like, with Gussie's gut, let's say something like this, that is actually going to help with that microbiome, which is really putting the icing on the health cake. So, let's get going with that, I say.
That's one of the pieces of learning. I mean, when I started Darwin's, I mean, perhaps, Ian, you were familiar with microbiome. I had never even heard that term back then, and it's only been in recent years that I think people in general have realized how critical that is, to have a healthy microbiome. And so that's something. As I said, we're constantly looking at again, inspired by nature, informed by science. This is where the science comes in and helps us understand how our pets' bodies work a little bit better. So that's something we're very supportive of, and especially I think that would be during to the earlier question that the caller asked about transitioning onto it. I think that would be a great time to be introducing these kind of ingredients to help condition, if you will, your pet's gut, so that that can process that raw food and have less incidence of that diarrhea that you were talking about.
Yeah, well, in fact, Gary, some people use straight tripe the contents of ruminants' guts to do that, but that could be hard to source, and it stinks and it's terrible. Whereas we have a product there that's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
But let me also say this. You mentioned we hadn't heard the word microbiome. I hadn't heard it. Certainly when I started out feeding raw dog food in place of processed dog food. And I actually Googled prebiotic the other day. It wasn't around, that word wasn't really used until 1995. But what I did know is that dogs ate poop. And so I knew that there had to be, and I looked at this and I said, well, bacterial bodies, what do they got? Well, they're actually living food. So they've got healthy protein, healthy essential fatty acids, because they have to have all these things. They're just like us. They're part of us. In fact, our cells are made from ancient bacteria. So they provided in many cases, almost a complete balanced diet for our dog. And I particularly like the German Shepherd, who would eat the dry dog food at one end, pass the poop out at the other, and then turn around and eat the poop. And people said, that's disgusting. My clients, I said, well, that actually, the poop at the back end is far more healthy than the stuff you're feeding at the front end. But let's try and do this better. And that's hence we do raw meaty bones and everything else that I advocate, and raw meat, etc., as you're doing, and making a complete and balanced diet that way. But now we can add that poop, if you will, by adding Gussie's gut, and it's a much more user-friendly way, with the added cheese to entice the dog to eat it. It actually smells good.
Yeah.
Which beats the poop.
I mean, it even smells good it just smells really great, and it's mild without the cheese. But this is, I want to just say one thing. We made Gussie's gut so it could be on any food. But I would say that if you're on a budget, the first thing you should spend your money on is an incredible food like Darwin's, and get the diet right. Get the base, the foundation right before you buy Gussie's gut. And if later on you want to add a really great superfood that's fermented, wonderful. Then we'd love to work with you. But yeah, getting this diet down, and I just feel grateful to be able to join the ranks of things like raw goat kefir and tripe and all these other great super healthy probiotic foods, because they are they're really, really important. But what you're doing, Gary, is frankly, I think, the most important. It's the foundation for all of these dogs' health, and without it, you could put any supplement on a really bad food. It's just not going to give you the results that you're getting with your customers.
Yeah, bang on, Rob. That's absolutely right.
Thank you. The only exception I would say to that is I think something like Gussie's gut is as important at the outset to help condition the gut. I mean, one of the biggest problems people have, as we heard from the caller, is that transitioning them onto a raw diet, and people get turned off by the loose stools and the diarrhea and things like that. So whatever we can do to have a successful transition, I think, is going to increase the probability of the dog staying on that diet. And I think that something like this, even before they start on our food, of helping to condition the gut so that when they do start to get our food, they're able to break it down more. I think that's a better way to go. Dr. Billinghurst, what do you think about that?
I'm listening to your wisdom, Gary, and 100% agreeing. Absolutely, yes, yeah. So I mean, but look, let's just combine the two. I say let's get going, get these dogs healthy. It is. I find it appalling. There are so many sick dogs out there that don't have to be sick. All they have to do is feed some decent food like what you're producing. And if they put the icing on the cake and even begin by feeding a good source of fermented food, a probiotic, prebiotic, we are winning. Yeah. And, the vet bills are going to go down. I want to see the veterinary profession change and become more of a preventative profession, because all we do at the moment is wait for the problems to occur, then look to diagnose them and treat them. And I'd love to see my profession become more preventative. We only think of prevention as worming and vaccination. We rarely, I don't think we ever think of it as food, because as a profession, we are trained to believe that the food that's out there, the dry food, the canned food, all that processed stuff, is the ultimate in nutrition, that it's got everything your dog needs, and therefore that problem has been solved. When in fact, the exact opposite is the case. The veterinary profession is advocating food that causes the problems, that drives the patients back to them. Great business model, but not good. So I want to change the business model of the veterinary profession and get companies like yours front and center as the product that the vets recommend. That's what we want. And the fact that you're delivering it to the door, I think that's great. That's a real big problem solved.
It makes a big difference. I mean, both in the cost to the consumer and to the convenience. I mean, that's what stops most people from feeding this the way. Most people get intuitively that real food is better than processed nuggets. I mean, I say I grew up in what I call the Wonder Bread generation, when we thought that science could improve on food. Or processing could improve on food, and we've turned 180 degrees now to the point where the less you do to the food in its natural state, the better it's going to be. And I think our learning with the microbiome is illustrative. There are things that we didn't even appreciate were in the natural food that were important, that were being processed out. And there are probably still some things that are still in food in its natural form that we don't appreciate how important they are to our pets and our own health. And so I kind of take it almost on faith that the less we can do to our pets' food and our own, the better it's going to be for them.
That's 100% right, Gary. 100% right.
You're Ian. You're bringing up we're all talking about the human healthcare system and how it's not a healthcare system; it's a sick care system, right? So it's the same. It's the same in our animals' lives. This brings me to a question that I was going to ask you, actually, Ian, about the last person, Rachel, who made a comment about how to get her animals on Darwin. So when somebody watching this is transitioning over to any diet, but let's just talk about raw, a really great diet like raw, and their dog or dogs or cats have diarrhea, how should somebody think of that? Whereas, I think what most people do is think, oh my gosh, that didn't agree with them. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. This is maybe the wrong diet for them. But what would you say is the way to think about that and how to work through those thoughts?
Well, the way to think about that is to go back to nature, to go back to how the dog has evolved. And if we look at a wolf or a dingo or a feral dog in the wild, if they eat purely muscle meat, they will have the squirts quite badly. It's absolutely natural. So it may not even be the fact that it's a change in diet, and it can be, because There's not a microbiome, for example, to handle that change. But having said that, the microbiome also rapidly changes in a healthy dog anyway to accommodate that change. And that's part of the reason that they begin to firm up their stools. But if you feed straight muscle meat to any dog, and you will get diarrhea. And of course, feeding straight muscle meat, for example, is an unbalanced diet, and and we don't do it for any great length of time. But so think of it as absolutely normal, unpleasant, but normal. And by a tincture of time will usually fix it. Now, of course, if it doesn't fix, then that's the point to go and see the vet and see if there's anything beyond straight nutrition, beyond microbiome, and anything that is actually incorrect and needs fixing. But basically, that's the way to think about it. It's quite natural. And don't be concerned about the health of your dog. Be concerned about the health of your carpet and the rest of it. But
true.
Overall, it's not going to kill your dog in the vast majority of cases. And that's why I don't get terribly well. That's one of the reasons I say go straight to chicken wings and or necks, because they tighten them up, and then you can gradually throw in other things. And in my case, I might say to them as a vet, look, feed them some chicken wings or necks for 3 or 4 days, watch how they go, and then start adding some of this processed, and it is processed, but it's minimally processed, this raw commercial diet in, and it will accommodate very quickly. Anyway, that's my approach. It's quite natural. It's quite normal. It's not alarming, except you do have to pay for that carpet cleaner, and they can be quite expensive.
and just as a tip, I'm sure you,
Gary, we are all students.
Yeah.
One of my best, we had a visiting professor from America in my second last year, and he told us, your best teachers will be your clients. And that's where it all started for me, because I started to ask the relationship from my clients between what they fed and noting what the health of the animal was. And so, but gosh, I've got such a long way to go. And when I talk to people like you, I learn, believe you me. And it's wonderful for me. So yes, we're all students.
Yeah, we are. One of the to the point, Rob, that you were asking earlier. I mean, one of the tips I got early on that I always pass on to folks that are in that situation. I mean, I think, Ian, you're right about a little diarrhea is not the end of the world. A little soft stool is not the end of the world. But still, you'd rather not have it. And pumpkin, to me, is my go-to ingredient whenever somebody either has loose or, on the other hand, constipation. We get to this point in the conversation where we're talking about poop.
Always,
we're used to it.
Pumpkin seems to be a good solution for both of those things to kind of regulate the stool. I don't know if you have any other tips in that help in those circumstances.
No, for me, it's just in my case, it's just throwing in some chicken wings and necks and getting it fixed. But I notice that what you're saying, that is kind of universal in the States. The pumpkin seems to be the go-to fix. So I've never actually used it. I guess I've never had to, but hey, if it works, that's fabulous. And I'm gathering that it does. So let me say to the people out there, if that's what you'd like to do, and it's a very safe fix. So go for it.
And just if anybody's thinking of that, it's actual pumpkin. It's not pumpkin pie filling. It's pumpkin. So you got to distinguish between them.
So tell me about that for a moment, Gary. Is it pumpkin cooked, pumpkin raw? How?
It must be raw. I mean, I just get it out of the can. It's pureed.
That's cooked, Gary. Yep.
It's cooked. Okay. All right. I never.
Yep.
It's a question I never asked about. Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, but it's really creamy and smooth. It comes out like the old cranberry sauce on Thanksgiving Day. It comes out in a big clump, and then you just stir it, and it's pretty creamy and smooth. But yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I suspect it's a bit like the old chicken and rice recipe, because I think it's the starch that has a very soothing effect on the gut. And having said that, that reminds me of one other thing: slippery elm bark powder, very similar.
Okay.
And again, if it was me and I was trying to take that approach, I might use some rice water, or you could mix the whole lot up. The rice water is very important because it's starchy. Pumpkin, slippery elm bark powder. I also used to get people to get the dogs to drink some tea with lemon in it. And that's very astringent too for the gut. And I'm just remembering this now. It's a long time since I advocated that.
Yeah.
And we'd throw in a bit of, it was about to a litre, we would throw in a teaspoon of salt. It was half a teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda. And maybe a little bit of honey just to take that terrible bicarb taste away. And throwing that in really helped with the gut. And it was also a kind of a homemade electrolyte balancing thing. And this all helped with those problems of diarrhea. And of course, you were getting more liquid in and helping to balance the electrolytes. So
and my go-to is pure coconut water. That's what he gets whenever he gets into something and has a bout.
Yep, that's another good one. Wasn't around when I was in the early days advocating that particular mix, but yeah.
We can do a whole show on diarrhea treatment here.
Well, I think we just did.
All right.
Yeah.
With often having my finger up, getting a fecal sample or expressing a set of anal glands, I'd look at the owner and said, 5 years at university to stick my fingers up the dog's backside.
That's right. So we have a bunch of comments which are really nice, but we won't share those on the screen. They're just good, really nice, good compliments about raw food or Darwins or other. They're great. But back to actually, Rachel has another really good question. It's actually a question I want to bring up for everybody, for anybody watching, whether it's a replay or not. Thanks again, Rachel. Do you recommend having a variety throughout the month of meats? So changing different types of meats like turkey, lamb, beef, etc., or just stick with one meat at the beginning? So I'll just add to this question. So do you advocate at Darwin's people do like a rotation of their protein sources and all of that?
Yes, for a variety of reasons. I'm going to presume that Rachel's talking about, because she is a new customer, I think she said, is initially, do we recommend the rotation? And there I would say probably if you haven't been feeding raw, we would say stick with one protein during the transition. Don't make your dog or cat
work too hard.
Acclimate, yeah, exactly. But once that's taken place, yes, we do advocate a rotation. It doesn't have to be strict. You said earlier, Ian, that they're used to getting a variety of diet. It's not on a regular basis. As long as over time they get all the nutrients, that's okay. And so I don't, if you happen to feed chicken 2 days in a row and then beef for 3 days and then that's fine. It doesn't really matter how precise you are, but there are different fats in particular. We understand the importance of fat now, and there's a difference between them, and it's therefore it's important. And Ian, you can probably explain this better than I can, why it's important to get that variety in there. So yes, if possible, I mean, unless there's only one protein that your pet can tolerate, we definitely recommend a variety.
Gary, that is the perfect answer you've just given. I can't do better. And variety, that's what you require. And people don't really have to know anything about nutrition as long as they know the basics, that it's food that supplies nutrients. And if they can supply a wide range of the foods our dogs evolved eating, their dog is going to be superbly healthy. And that's what you're doing, particularly when they start to feed a wide variety of food. So yes, when you start off, don't stress that gut too much with a wide variety of protein sources. Just stick to the one, maybe for 2 or 3 weeks till your dog is absolutely producing beautiful stools in the backyard, and then start to mix it up and change it around. And also, you'll notice any changes in the way your dog behaves, what the stool looks like. It's important to be an observant dog owner. And actually, having said that, I don't know a dog owner or pet parent, whatever you want to call them, who isn't an observant. They are the keenest mothers out there. And I can testify that to my own darling Rosalind. She pesters me all the time. Ian, this is going on. How do you do this? It'll be right, darling. But, they are keen observers. And so watch your dog. Watch your dog's weight. Too much. Ironically, it's maybe often not too much fat that has made our dogs fat, because if they get a lot of fat, they just naturally don't eat a lot of food. It's the carbohydrates. But of course, we are not feeding those carbohydrate-rich foods. Obesity is very much dependent upon the modern food with all its carbohydrates. But yep, that variety, stay steady at the beginning and then change it up as time goes by. Perfect answer, Gary.
Thank you.
Well, this has been really great. This has been fun. We're at our hour. So, Gary, thank you so much for the time today and sharing a little bit about your company. I'll tell you, I learned, it's what now, 22 years ago, from Ian, how to feed my dog, my first black lab my first dog as an adult. How to feed him raw, but I sure as heck wish you were around when I started, because I was hacking up turkeys, and I mean, no joke, I was buying these big turkeys. I bought a cleaver for the first time and hacking these turkeys up, giving them to him whole per Ian, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And he's dragging them all around I had to clear the whole floor of the kitchen and lock them in it, because he would, thrash and have fun with it. And I mean, then I had to clean up my whole floor afterward. It would have just been a whole hell of a lot easier to feed Darwins, I tell you. So thank you.
Glad I could help.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed this hour. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, gentlemen.
I think we all have. It's been lovely to meet you, Gary, and to get a bit more insight into Darwin's. Wonderful.
You as well.
Well, great. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and submitting questions in the comments. And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Gussie's Gut. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good day.